What's going on, everyone? You're listening to the My Eagle Nation podcast. I'm Alex Miller with the Eagle. Up here, that's Travis Brown. He's still in Omaha, finishing up coverage of the College World Series. Texas A&M, of course, made it to the semifinals for the first time in school history of the College World Series, but ultimately fell 5-1 to Oklahoma on Wednesday. Travis, it's been a long week for the Aggies in Omaha. Can you just kind of summarize just the week in general and how they did up there at the greatest show on dirt?
Well, I'm still here at Charles Schwab's Field. I'm waiting for my plane flight that I had to bump up to later tonight. So I'm sitting here working on my column, and that's kind of exactly what I'm focusing on. I know it may not have felt like it coming in, but really and truly, A&M was playing with house money. First year head coach and coaching staff at A&M. They had to bring in so many transfers, completely rebuild the roster in just a few months before the fall started, and they really didn't have any starting pitching. And to make it all the way to the national semifinal, I mean, they were playing with house money all the way through this. They didn't, even if they didn't make it to the College World Series, it would have been a successful season. They made it to the College World Series in Jim Schlosnagel's first year. If they wouldn't have won that game, gotten that elusive first game since 1993, it still would have been a successful season. They happened to do that and then double their total output of College World Series games this season in just this one trip. They only had two prior to this. And then they make it all the way to the national semifinals, and they were 2 wins away from going to the final series. I mean, it was just an unbelievable series, and one that I don't think anybody actually saw coming. Season, excuse me. I don't think anyone saw coming, and what they were able to do with such a pieces parts put together kind of team was absolutely unbelievable. So I think tip of the cap to Jim Schlossnagel, to his staff, especially his staff, his support staff, Nate Yeski, Michael Early, Nolan Kane, what they were able to do to build this. I mean, it was pretty truly a revolutionary season for the Aggies in everything that was everything that took place. So yeah.
A week of high highs and some low lows. I feel like we talked a lot about, can A&M swing their way to Omaha? Well, the question became, could they have swung their way through Omaha? You know, what was it about David Sandlin's performance for Oklahoma yesterday that really just made it to where A&M wasn't going to be able to swing their way into an if game today?
Yeah, I mean, you just got there. There wasn't all that many great pitchers in college baseball this year. You didn't have the Kumar Rockers and the Jack Lighters and those kind of guys that you've had in years past. It was, there's some conspiracy theorists out there, and you can kind of count me as one of them. Claire Schlossnagel, Jim Schlossnagel also mentioned it too, about the fact that it just seems there's something different about this ball this year that they're using that is playing towards more offense. You go out and look at Charles Schwab Field here, it's always been a graveyard. It's been one that it's been hard to hit home runs. Even in the first season that it was built, after the first season, they actually moved the fences in because there just were so few home runs hit here, and the ball has been flying out of the park this year. There haven't really been that many close games. And so, to all that being said, when A&M finally did run into a really good pitcher, a really good pitching performance, they paid, because they just hadn't seen those kind of performances throughout the season, like what David Sandlin was able to do yesterday. He followed the same kind of routine that Nathan Detmer did earlier. He got ahead in the count against A&M batters early, used his fastball to do that, and had a good pitch mix. Was able to control all of his pitches, which is something that not a lot of pitchers have been able to say. Like I said, they've done this year, and kept A&M on their back foot the whole game. When you're able to get ahead of A&M quickly and establish the fastball quickly early in the count, get them behind. A&M is a good hitting team with two strikes late in the count, but if you're throwing a lot of different pitches, it's hard to sit on the fastball and take the other stuff, foul the other stuff off. You're going to have to make a good swing on one of those secondary pitches, and it's hard to do no matter who you are.
I think something that was overshadowed in A&M's loss yesterday was the performance on the mound by Jacob Polish for A&M. And, after the game, definitely an emotional response from him, Troy Claunch, two graduate students that came in. What do guys like Polish and Quanch and then even Dylan Rock and Cole Kaler, those kind of guys who came in on a whim, mean to this A&M program as they're trying to get things going in a different direction under Schlossnagel?
Yeah, Jacob Palish said it well. It was closure for those guys. He didn't know he could have maybe gone pro last season after his last year at Stanford. He's kind of felt like he had some unfinished business, wanted to go one more round in the college game, and it's hard to get into grad school at Stanford. So he was able to come to A&M and kind of get that closure he needed. Same thing for Troy Clonch falling over, getting recruited by Nate Yeske, a guy who was his coach at Oregon State, and uh, putting together a really good year. I mean, think about all the runners that Troy Clonch threw out at the end of the year. He only had through the Super Regionals and their whole College World Series appearance, he only had one stolen base attempt against him, and that was because Ryan Targott's glove got kicked off. The throw was there. They had the tag down. The glove just came off. The ball came out. Other than that, he was 6 for 7, I think, through the Super Regionals and the. Actually, I think he was 7 for 8 through the College World Series and the Super Regionals. So what he's able to do, and then can't not mention Cole Kaler at shortstop, who when Cly Harrison, who was one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball, goes down, Cly Harrison steps up, who really should have been and was going to be A&M's second baseman, plays shortstop, does a good job with on-base percentage and drawing walks and getting on base to produce some runs for the Aggies. And then Micah Dallas, great outing. He talked to me a lot this weekend about how when he had 2 starts for Texas Tech when they were here in 2019, his freshman season, and they didn't go, neither one went his way. Uh, and there was an article written about him looking pretty dejected in the locker room back when the locker rooms were open here at the College World Series after they got eliminated. And he said he saved the clipping of that article, the screenshot of that article, in a contact in his phone that was labeled "Remember." And he said he was looking on it in the plane right here, reading that article just to make sure he didn't feel that same way when they left. And he sure was able to have a bounce back performance at the College World Series for the Aggies this year. They wouldn't have been able to do it without those guys, those grad transfers this season. They were a huge part of that in both on the field and in morale and in being locker room guys. And you got to credit Nolan Kane, Nate Yeske, Jim Schlossnagel, and being able to bring those guys in to help make such a quick turnaround.
Yeah, and what looking at the coaching staff in particular, do you think is it too early to tell? But do you think it might be kind of hard for Schloss to keep that whole core together? Guys might be calling from other schools, try and nab a couple of those assistants.
I think the first guy the guy that they might really have trouble holding on to is Michael Early with what he was able to do. I mean, college baseball has gotten offensive, and I don't know if it's going to stay that way. If it is to have something to do with the ball, or if it has something to do with pitchers losing a season in that COVID year. Jim Schlossnagle also mentions the ways that modern little league select ball, high school ball is being taught with pitchers only, and the way that velocity over secondary pitches and developing those, if that changes. But um, I think hitting is something that is going to be even extra important. And to be able to be one of these teams that's so rare, that swung their way to Omaha, swung their way to at least one win. I mean, you can definitely credit Nathan Detmer with a great outing in that game that won that for the Aggies, but swung their way here. He's gonna have a lot of people looking at him, and I'll be interested to see if they're able to hold on to him.
Well, we talked about the grad transfers, what they meant for A&M, but they're going to bring some pieces back. What's kind of maybe the outlook of this A&M team, and what are maybe some holes that they're going to need to address this offseason, whether it's incoming freshmen, guys who weren't able to play this year, or through the transfer portal, which A&M really took advantage of last year, and it seems they've already kind of dipped into that already.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to bring in starting pitching because they're going to lose Micah. They really only had two actual full-blown starting pitchers this year in Nathan Detmer and Micah Dallas. They're going to lose Micah Dallas to graduation. He was a grad transfer, so they've got to bolster that. They've already started with USC's Carson Lambert, who's coming in, and he's a right-hander from Southern Cal, and he's going to probably slot right into that starting rotation. They return Nathan Detmer, who made big strides. I mean, you got to think about the A&M programs of years past, when they really had things rolling in the pitching side of things. and you could always know who the starting rotation was going to be because they had this system developing of, well, here's the guy who was their long relief guy, or here was a guy who was their Tuesday guy, and you knew he was going to move up in the rotation when one of those guys got drafted or moved on, and then the Sunday guy would move up to Saturday. There was just natural line of order every year because they were so deep in starting pitching that you basically knew each year who was going to slot into each position because they had that experience. They got to get back to that place in building up the starting pitching to where you know that the Tuesday night guy is going to become the Saturday or Sunday guy the next year, and the Saturday guy is going to become the Friday guy. Carson Lambert's going to slot right into maybe even being the Friday guy for A&M. You'll have to see how things go next year. It would be nice to see the development of Ryan Prager, or them to bring in another left-handed arm that could be starting, because it's always good to have that variance of days. Look at this Oklahoma team that they played. They needed left-handed arms against them. Notre Dame was extremely right-handed, and so going righty against them was good. When you can vary that up, it helps. Got to go starting pitching. Wouldn't hurt to bring in another catching option. I know they have Chandon Scamardo backing up Troy Clonch here, but he's going to go. So always good to be deep in catchers, and just keep continuing to bring those hitters in. But pitching is key. Pitching is what's going to win championships. I would venture to guess, after watching that Arkansas Ole Miss game last night, that once you get into the final series, pitching is going to be a little bit more at play than just these high-powered up-tempo offenses. And so, yeah, you can swing your way. You might be able to swing your way to Omaha this year and maybe in some of the years in the future, but pitching is still what's going to win the national championship for you.
Well, looking at this run and just A&M's season in general, what does it really do for the outlook of the program? And as you look at this season, do you think maybe the unexpectedness of this run was maybe even sweeter for the Aggies?
Yeah, me and Brent Zorneman of the Houston Chronicle were kind of walking around the baseball town, the baseball village, that's what it's called outside where they had the shops yesterday. And because we thought, we have some Aggie family, Aggie friends at home, and the kind of the bit, one of my favorite bits is as soon as a team gets eliminated, all that merch gets put on 50% off. And so we thought, well, maybe we could go nab a t-shirt or something like that. And A&M stuff was hard to find yesterday. They didn't really have those sale racks. And I think that is indicative of the fact that no matter what happened in this run, I think A&M fans were going to be happy. You didn't have A&M fans leaving town mad like they may have had in years past, and not really wanting to bring home that souvenir or get, you know, bring something home like that. So I think that you're right. I think the surprise nature of this did lend itself to a happier departure. We were talking about the players leaving the locker room for the last time. There's a lot of times where the players will just have their head down, walk down the hallway, go out, get on the bus, and leave. And while you could tell there's emotion, a lot of them had been emotional in the locker room. They took time to stop and hug some family members, sign some autographs, kind of soak it all in a little bit at the end. You had a happy program leaving Omaha this year as opposed to some of the years past.
Well, Travis, we can close with this. The end of the baseball season marks the end of the athletic calendar for this school year. Looking ahead, do you feel like there's a sense of optimism among the major sports at A&M, whether it's men's basketball after their run to the NIT finals, or baseball going to the College World Series, and then even on the women's side when they're making a couple of big hires in women's basketball and in softball?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty impressive turnaround from what happened in the fall. You look at the way soccer misses the NCAA tournament for the first time in forever, and football had a little bit of a down year, lost some games that people probably thought that they shouldn't have. Women's basketball started off bad. Robert Cessna, our very own Robert Cessna, had a column last year talking about how it was not a fun fall for Aggie athletics and what they're able to do there, and they really made quite the turnaround with, like you said, men's basketball going to the NIT, the women's tennis almost falling just short of a national championship and winning an SEC title, men's baseball doing what they were able to do to get out here. It was a very productive swing and a good turnaround from what was maybe necessarily not such a great fall in the programs. With the commitments that they're making to the athletic program, to and then the facilities. When you look at new football practice facility, new track indoor, Jim Schlossnagle this week was talking, or yesterday was talking about wanting to jumpstart some of those renovations to Bluebell. He even told us afterwards that he would hope that things are starting to get in place by spring of 24, I believe, if not then the start of 25, the 23 to 25 range on bolstering Bluebell, because he said that that was a big part of the conversations of him taking the job, is that they would make that commitment. And I think when you do have those commitments, having successful seasons like they were had this year helps move those things along a little quicker on the donor front. But B, kind of keeps that stuff rolling to where that you don't necessarily need those big overhauls. Things can kind of come in phases and continue to grow and develop, and all of those are pieces, are parts to maintaining a healthy and successful program. So yeah, I think there is some momentum there, and I think that there will be some tangible representations of that momentum here shortly for all the programs. But also, before we go, moving on, I know you were watching some of the games from home. I had my earpiece in, but sometimes it cut in and out. I was curious to see how did A&M and M and the program play on national TV? It's a spotlight. The College World Series is unlike any that you'll get in college baseball, because you're on ESPN. You've got the Sunday night baseball guys calling the games. What was that perspective like from those who were watching at home?
Yeah, A&M certainly in the spotlight, especially when they played Texas. I mean, that was a really big game. Talked a lot about Micah Dallas getting deep into the game. Talked a lot about Nathan Detmer bouncing back. Ben McDonald, he was the color analyst for all of A&M's games, and a pitcher who notoriously beat A&M a couple times in the regional in 1989. And he talked about how, they won those games at A&M, and then he came to Omaha and did terrible. And he kind of felt for Detmer that first game when they played Oklahoma and he didn't do so good. But then coming back and having the performance that he did against Notre Dame, I mean, so much praise. And then, a lot of talk about just the grittiness of A&M's at bats at the plate, talking a lot about how take a lot of first pitches, how pitchers don't take advantage of that, get behind an account, they run their counts up. A&M gets to the bullpen pretty quickly. And when they do, they make their money in the later innings against a lot of relievers. There was a lot of talk about that. There was some talk about Pringles. There was some talk about Jim Schlossnagle's bananas. And, they had a good time. A&M definitely had some positive feedback from being in the national spotlight. And, certainly a lot of talk about how the SEC really showcased itself, not only with the current teams that are there, but, at one point, it's all current and future SEC members left in the field at Omaha, and just the outlook that has in the conference, and just the testament that it speaks to the depth. And especially when you consider a team like Ole Miss, who was the last team into the field of 64. I mean, they're having a chance today to play for a spot in the championship series. So
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of good things there. Mentioned Nathan Detmer's turnaround. I mean, he had 7 starts coming into this that were just subpar with by his own standards. He said he had, and especially that Oklahoma game. I mean, it was all over everything that he said. He was emotional. He went back to the hotel and cried. He wasn't happy, and he was glad to be able to have the performance. Got to talk to his mom too about how they had gone home thinking he probably wouldn't pitch unless they got back to the weekend, and they as soon as they got home, he called and said he was going to pitch, and they hopped on a red eye, and his mom came back and was here for the game. Trevor Warner and Jordan Thompson are 2 guys that kind of separated themselves and kind of had strong performances in Omaha and through the NCAA tournament. Trevor Warner is a guy that Jim Schlossnagle frequently mentioned as a future all SEC type player if they can keep him around. And it'll be interesting to see kind of his development where he can progress in that way. Jack Moss too, just absolute professional hitter. Was hitting over 500 most of the postseason and did a good job there. And two, something that Schlossnagle mentioned is the guys got to experience Omaha. There's so much fun around this tournament that you can experience and see and do. And as he said, get the 936 T-shirts that all your friends and family want from back home. So it's a lot of fun, and they did it right this year.
Well, I think that's going to put a bow on our coverage in Omaha. Travis, you got a column to write and a plane to catch, so we'll let you get to it. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the My Nation podcast. Be sure to check theeagle.com for all of our final coverage from the College World Series. For Travis Brown, I'm Alex Miller. We'll see you next time.